week ago, President Joe Biden established a commission of at least 32 people to look into the possibility of expanding the Supreme Court. Now during that time, it wasn't known what the number would be to expanding the Supreme Court. Right? It could have been 10 justices or 11 justices or potentially nineteen justices. I mean, in total, at least. But with the recent introduction of a new legislative bill within the House, which is supported by Jerry Nadler of all people, the Democrats, or at least a certain faction of them, want to increase the Supreme Court seats from 9 to 13. Now, the reason, and at least this is what Jerry Nadler is arguing, is that it represents every single district across the United States because there are at least 13 judicial districts across the United States. While currently we have 9 Supreme Court justices. 13 is to represent each and every one of them that he says. And apparently to him, even though that it goes completely against the definition, this isn't court packing. In fact, he goes on to argue that what the Republicans did, at least under Donald Trump, when he put in Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and even Amy Coney Barrett, that was court packing, despite the fact that it was under legal pretenses and that basically bit the Democrats in the ass, especially with allowing the nuclear option instead of the 60 votes required to originally allow a person onto the Supreme Court. But again, that again bit them in the ass. And as a result, thanks to their previous calls to threaten the Supreme Court, due to after Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed, they have threatened to potentially pack the Supreme Court. Now, recently, Nancy Pelosi has said that she is not going to put this bill on the floor to vote, which makes perfect sense if you are a pragmatic politician. Now she did establish that she plans on to, at the very least, study the possibility. But in reality, this doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere because there are a lot of Democrats that are not looking at this very positively. As a matter of fact, one of the Supreme Court justices, when told about the commission by President Biden to potentially expand the Supreme Court, Justice Breyer warned this week, and I'm quoting directly from the New York Times, that efforts to expand the court for political reasons could undermine the trust that the public has in the court and the decisions that it makes on important issues. I hope and expect that the court will retain its authority, he said. But that authority, like the rule of law, depends upon trust. A trust that the court is guided by legal principle, not politics. Structural alteration motivated by the perception of political influence can only feed that perception, further eroding that trust. Now, I will say this in regards to what he says. Already the court is political. There's already a faction of conservatives, a faction of liberals. In fact, Justice Breyer, who happens to be 82 and is the oldest leading figure within the liberal faction, is the leader of said liberal faction. But he is right about the idea that the Democrats adding more seats to the Supreme Court. Because this basically nullifies any need for the Supreme Court to be there in the first place. Let's say the Democrats do go ahead with adding 4 more justices to the Supreme Court. This basically allows Biden and the Democratic Party to get all their policies across. HR 1 passed. It's constitutional thanks to the 4 additional liberal justices. The infrastructure bill passed. Constitutional. Gun control passed. Constitutional. And this could easily go on and on forever. If the Republicans in the future, and again, consider this timeline, decide to pull off the same kind of precedents, that would basically lead to the same thing happening. There would be more there will be additional justices on the Supreme Court, this time conservatives, and then the Republicans will get all their things passed. Basically, it basically destroys the entire purpose of the Supreme Court. However, there is some good news, because I have been talking about people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and for good reason, who are definitely going to be playing a major role in this. I would not be surprised whatsoever if the House, due to having a slim Democratic majority, does pass such a resolution to expand the justices of the Supreme Court. But I do not expect the Senate itself to actually pass that. I know, from what I understand, they need at least 60 votes within the Senate. They can't be able to get at least 10 Republicans to expand the Supreme Court. Now, at least that's as far as I know. Even if they don't need 60, all they need is just one Democrat to say no, and that one Democrat happens to be Joe Manchin. Take that back. There are actually two Democrats, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Both of them are pretty pragmatic. After all, they're from Republican states. They don't like the backlash, and they probably want to keep their position for as long as possible. This makes them key players within deciding what bills pass or fail within the Senate. They're pretty, at this point in time, these two are major players. The Democrats need them. Now, with that being said, either way, I don't think the Democrats have any real chance, or at least they already know they have no chance to expand the Supreme Court. Here's what I mean. This is meant to be a tactic made by the Democrats to put pressure on the Supreme Court. This has actually been tried before. Under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a lot of his policies, especially, New Deal policies, were passed by, of course, the Congress, which was democratically controlled at the time, but the Supreme Court, which still had the conservative Republican majority, actually voted that many of them were unconstitutional. So he went so far. FDR actually went so far as to threaten the possibility of court packing. Now, of course, there were a few Democrats at the time who were not so keen on this, but nonetheless, he had the potential power to expand the Supreme Court, to pack it. And that's when the event known as the Switch in Time that saved 9 occurred. In fact, let me bring it up on here with Wikipedia. Here we go. The Switch in Time to save 9, the phrase, and it was during the 1937 case, West Coast Hotel v. Parrish. And I know that Wikipedia is screwed up a lot, but I just using this just for summary. This was at a moment when Chief Associate Justice Owen Roberts of the Supreme Court decided to vote on the side of the liberals. And this allowed Franklin Roosevelt to pass many of his New Deal programs. Now, of course, this meant that the court packing plan that FDR had was shelved. But nonetheless, the fact that very idea of court packing exists put pressure on the Supreme Court to rule in favor of the liberals, the Democratic Party. And I'm willing to bet that this is what's happening right now. Now, of course, right now, the Democratic Party doesn't exactly have a whole lot of control. It does have control of both the House and the Senate, but by a very slim margin. So they're going to try in whatever means to be able to put as much pressure on other institutions of government, such as the Supreme Court, as possible. After all, President Trump managed to establish 3 justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. Now, here's the part where there may be a solution to this overall political strategy made by the Democrats. And it's actually something that Ted Cruz actually brought up. Now, normally there are times when I like Ted Cruz, there are times when I don't like Ted Cruz. But this is one time where I have to say I like him. Because he proposed the idea of an amendment to the Constitution of the United States as a result of these calls for court packing. He said within this amendment that the number of justices on the Supreme Court shall be 9. And honestly, I think that would be perfectly reasonable. It's a non-number. It's been basically the same amount of justices we had for at least a century from my guess, and this puts a lot of pressure off of the Supreme Court, not just from the executive branch, because they're the ones who are trying to nominate a lot of candidates to the Supreme Court when there's a vacancy, but even by the legislature. No longer will the issue of court packing be used, or at least the threat of court packing be used against the Supreme Court if this amendment is ever passed. Now, with its current conception, with the Democrats, that's unlikely, but hopefully with 2022, and I'm just being very, very generous right here because I don't know, it's politics in Washington. There could be an introduction to an amendment to the Constitution which says that the number of justices shall remain at 9. Again, this will stop the threat of court packing and allow the Supreme Court to do its own thing. There are times when I don't like the Supreme Court, and it's especially when they're constantly bowing down to the executive branch or the Congress, or just the Democratic Party in general. Because let's face it, with people like Chief Justice Roberts, they tend to do that a lot. It gets really annoying. They're fine with things like gun rights, but on certain issues, like maybe on abortion or certain government programs like the Affordable Care Act, they suddenly become swing votes. Again, the establishment of this amendment to the Constitution, I believe, can allow the Supreme Court to have overall its authority again, and without feeling the pressure from these two separate branches of government. If there is ever court packing, that authority, that trust, goes out the window. The Supreme Court would just be another political entity. And it'll just be completely useless at that. The original function of the Supreme Court lost to history, with court packing going on both sides of the aisle once the precedent is set. This is why I don't really like any changes to the Supreme Court with this current conception. Again, it's clear that the Supreme Court is definitely political, with liberal and conservative factions. But we cannot make it any more political. I've heard ideas about proposing an amendment to have term limits for Supreme Court justices. Something that I'm actually quite against, to be honest. There's a reason why the Founding Fathers established the Supreme Court to be basically an oligarchy to some extent, which rules on whether laws are constitutional or not constitutional. They made clear that the Supreme Court, is current conception, is the way it is. Same reason why they established the House of Representatives to support the will of the people, and the Senate, as it was originally intended, to support that of the states. Specifically before the 1900s, where the state legislators would choose the senators rather than popular vote. But there's still some of that. Power. Still some of that concept remain despite that amendment being passed. And of course, with the executive branch basically having the best ideals of a centralized government and executive authority. That's why I do not support any other changes to the Supreme Court, except for the amendment that I just stated. There should be 9 justices, no more. The Supreme Court is already, as an understatement, crazy. We shouldn't make it any more crazy with either court packing or with term limits. And we honestly should take away that pressure from the Supreme Court, as is our duty as Americans. My name is Noah Meehan on The Arc Truth. Please post your comment down below, like this video, subscribe, and share with friends. Also, if you have any issues regarding my videos, such as how I speak, which I tend to stutter a lot, sorry about that, framing, or whatever, please post them down in the comment section down below, or directly message me. Thank you.